I will never forget the night my sister Danielle and I were home alone on a Friday while our parents were out. I was 12 and she was 13. We live in an average-sized house, but you can hear almost everything that happens inside it. For instance, you could be on the top floor and still hear someone speaking down in the den. We were both in our own rooms upstairs, doing our own thing. That was when I heard it. A light tapping sound coming from downstairs in the den. I quickly realized it seemed like someone was tapping on the back door. I figured it was Danielle, so I headed down to the den. It was too dark outside to make out who was there, so I switched on the outside light. It was not my sister, but a man I had never seen before. He looked around his mid-40s with long black hair that was starting to turn gray, red cheeks, and he was probably 6 feet 1 inch tall. Since this was the door that led to our backyard, and some stranger was standing behind it, I almost ran away. But the man stared at me with a look that did not seem threatening, almost like he needed help. I pushed the door screen open a little so he could speak to me. He told me he needed to use our phone. I asked him why and how he ended up in our backyard. He ignored my questions and begged me to let him inside. I apologized and told him he needed to leave before I called the police. I tried to slide the door window shut again, but he stopped it with his arm and started reaching inside our house as he tried to unlock the door. When I shouted for my sister, he pulled his arm back. I ran upstairs and met my sister halfway. She peeked down the stairs toward the den and saw the man still standing there. She called our parents. They told us to call the police and stay upstairs. We stayed in our rooms for a while. There were no more tapping sounds or anything else, so with me being a 12-year-old trying to act brave, I walked back downstairs to the den. He was no longer standing by the door, but the door window was lower than when I had left it, and it hit me that I never closed it fully in the first place. I stepped closer to the door and glanced to my left. The door to the office was now open. I could have sworn it had been shut before. It was far too dark to see inside, and I was not about to walk in there. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, switched on the flash, and tapped the button. As the picture was taken, the bright flash filled the room just long enough for me to see the man who had been at the door earlier was now crouched over my office desk, and in the photo his head was turned toward me. I had no idea if he was coming toward me or not, but it felt like he was, and I bolted upstairs and locked the den door. A light tapping began again, this time coming from the den door, and I heard the man on the other side pleading for me to open it. I yelled for my sister again and lied to the man that the police had already arrived. After that he went silent, and I heard the back door open and close. It might have been foolish to say that, since it ruined any chance of the man being caught, but it also might have kept us safe, because the police did not show up for another 5 minutes. This story is told from the point of view of the father of the writer. My girlfriend's brother and I had been chatting about hunting, and I decided to take him on a trip. It was his very first time going, so I wanted to bring him somewhere that I knew he would be able to get a deer. I asked my uncle if we could use his land, and he said we could stay there for the weekend. I told him that was great, and that we would stay. Adam and I packed our gear and drove out there. It was a hidden piece of property right in the middle of nowhere in Braxton County, West Virginia. We arrived at my uncle's place. He already had his truck running and told us to hop inside. We got in, and I asked him where we were headed. He said he was taking us to his hunting cabin about 10 to 15 miles away. When we finally got to the cabin, it was much less impressive than we expected. 2 rooms and very small. As soon as we brought our things inside, he took off. He told us to enjoy ourselves and waved as he drove away. Later, while we were settling in for the night, we noticed there were no curtains or lights, only lanterns. We did not like how exposed we were, so we hung clothes over the windows. Not long after that, We got into bed. Only a few minutes passed before we heard a sound outside, like metal trash cans being smashed together. Adam began to get uneasy until I told him it was probably just a bear or something else wandering around. Go back to sleep. I told Adam not to wake me again unless the cabin was on fire. I drifted off again, at least until Adam started shaking my arm, whispering, "Cliff, wake up. There is someone outside." "No, go back to sleep. There is nobody." I stopped speaking because on the outside wall next to Adam's bed came a sound, almost like someone or something dragging its claws or nails straight down the side of the cabin and stopping near the far window. Right after that came a tapping on the glass. Neither of us wanted to lift the clothes to find out what it was. I told Adam to load his gun, and I did the same. We stayed awake until daylight and left as soon as we could. We asked my uncle if he had tried to scare us. He had no idea what we were referring to. The writer says his father never returned to that cabin. The picture that was included was taken by his uncle before he drove away, and the cabin is visible in the background. I was 19 years old at the time, working at a shady motel. The place was very run down, and most of the people who stayed there were locals who were doing things they were not supposed to be doing. The police showed up several times a week. I worked the front desk, checking in these strange guests at all hours of the night, and I also worked as a housekeeper who had to clean up their awful, vomit-smelling rooms afterward. One afternoon, I was on housekeeping duty in the second building of the motel, on the back end, farthest from the office. I hated being over there because it had the most beat-up rooms, and it was usually empty and way too quiet. I started cleaning one of my last rooms and wanted to finish fast because it was getting late. I was wiping down the mirror in the room when I suddenly saw a man in the reflection staring at me. He looked about 55, filthy, with long, greasy hair. Startled, I yelled, "Oh my God." I told him he had frightened me. The room I was cleaning was empty, so there was no reason this man should have been in there watching me work. But we had just had a meeting about customer satisfaction, and my boss was pushing us to be extra polite and help guests however we could. Sir?" I asked in a careful voice. "Do you need anything? Towels?" The man only stared at me with a crooked smile and held out his hands toward me. I figured he might be giving me a tip for cleaning his room earlier, but when I looked down and saw he was holding a $100 bill, warning bells started going off in my mind. No one gives a $100 tip on a $40 room. The man kept smiling and said his name was Terry. He said he was staying in the room next door with his wife Sherry and made a little joke about their names sounding alike. He smelled like oil from a car and alcohol. When I asked him why he was offering me that money, he laughed from deep in his chest and said, "Me and my wife were watching you, and we just wanted to have fun with you." I felt my stomach drop. No, I cannot do that, sir." "I am sorry." I wanted to run screaming from the room, but he was standing in front of the door, the only way out. The man smiled again, using a calmer voice, and told me to come to his room to meet his wife, only to talk as friends. I shakily told him no again, and said that I had a lot of work to finish that day. I prayed quietly that he would just leave, and after a moment he did. He let out a grunt and walked away in what I assumed was the direction of his room. My thoughts started racing. There is no wife. I kept telling myself, this man might try to take me. I was only 110 pounds at the time and not very strong. He could overpower me without any effort. I locked the room from the inside and went straight to the phone to call my manager at the front desk, but the phone was dead. A rush of fear surged through me, and even though I had always been told not to panic, I could not help it. Did he cut the phone line? No, I told myself. This is a rundown motel, and the phones fail all the time, but I still need to get out. I suddenly remembered that my cell phone was sitting on my housekeeping cart, but the cart was outside the locked door. I would have to open the door to reach it. I slowly opened the door of the room I was cleaning and looked out. I did not see anyone, so I hurried to search the cart for my cell phone. I was spending too much time trying to find it, so I decided to run as fast as I could toward the front desk and the office. Then from behind me, I heard the man again. Only this time he was shouting to someone else. "She is running. She is getting away." I could hear his shoes hitting the pavement as he chased me. I darted around the corner, pulled out my keycard, and rushed into a stockroom where I locked the door. In a few seconds, I heard the sound of the dirty man and another person running outside, looking for me. I stayed inside that stockroom for half an hour, trembling until I no longer heard them searching. At last, I gathered enough courage to run the rest of the way to the front desk. When I reached it, I collapsed into my boss's arms, and he contacted the police. The man and whoever was with him sped off before the officers arrived, and I was deeply shaken. The police later told me that this was not the first time he had done something similar, and he was already wanted for sexual assault, gross sexual imposition, and had previously been charged with rape. A few weeks later, on my birthday, the man was finally caught. A few weeks after that, I left the job. I will never work at a motel again.